Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Monday, the 14th of November, 2016. Let's take a look at what's happening. Hurricane season not over. I think most people should know, hopefully they do, that hurricane season runs 6 months out of the year, June 1st through November 30th, in terms of a calendar. Sometimes Mother Nature extends that on either side of those bookends of June and November, and we can get development in pretty much any other month of the year. I don't think we've seen any in February. I'd have to go back and check. But really the prime time's obviously August, September, October. But then in November there are periods where we get a favorable window set up, like we see down here in the Western Caribbean, and you get a disturbance coming along, and voila, you can have something to develop. So this will be the area to watch. You can clearly see that we do have an area of disturbed weather down here. You can also see that the upper level winds are fanning out. They are not blowing across like we have up here. This is where the upper level winds are very, very strong. But down here they are much more calm in the upper atmosphere. A bubble of anticyclonic flow, and that extends to the southwest of Jamaica right here, south of the Caymans. And it looks like something's going to try to get going in this area over the next several days, but it's going to be a fairly slow process. The National Hurricane Center indicates over the next 5 days there's really nothing yet on the 2-day outlook. So this is the 5-day outlook. This is a 60% chance of development into at least a depression by day 5, but it may take longer than that. It seems like later in the season it takes longer for things to come together, but come together it looks like it may do over the next week or so. Looking at climatology for the time period that we are traveling through now, the 11th through the 20th, the middle third of the month, the only concentration, everything else is pretty much scattered, but the one area where everything's concentrated, as few as they are, would be the Western Caribbean, and specifically the Southwest Caribbean here, where our system is trying to get going. There's a few development areas that have taken place over the past 100+ years. So this isn't a total surprise. It's not shocking. It's not a sign of something. It's a sign that the La Nina is in place here, because you're not having strong upper level winds cutting across the Caribbean constantly and not allowing anything to develop. But to say that it's a sign of something else, I think is a little ridiculous, and some people will probably say, well, there you go, it's been the warmest year ever, and this is just another indication of that. Well, I would argue that it's more of the La Nina, and it is officially a La Nina, by the way. The thresholds were met. I'll talk about that more on tomorrow's update, but it's not unprecedented. If we had something to develop here, I would be a little bit more concerned, especially if it developed out here and became a powerful hurricane, for example, because we have had nothing out that way in the very deep tropics in this time frame over the past 100+ years. So don't make too much of it. Sometimes these happen. These things will develop. Looking at the upper level wind chart from the University of Wisconsin site, here's Central America right here, and Colombia in South America. There is Jamaica. And you see there's a good anticyclonic flow around the area. Upper level winds are generally light at the 100 to 250 millibar level, so kind of proves the point here that we're not having them screaming across the system like you see up here. This is where you have some stronger upper level winds, but this is the cocoon for something to develop within, and I think it'll do so. So we start looking for the clues. Right now things are still starting to come together, so we don't have much in the way of vorticity or spin down here. There's just a little bit of energy, but it's elongated and confined to the extreme Southwest Caribbean. That should change over the next few days, so we'll monitor that. Pretty good area of vorticity sitting off the southeast coast in association with a non-tropical piece of energy that finally brought some, believe it or not, much needed rainfall after Matthew. You probably wouldn't hear a lot of people saying we need rainfall, but when you go 30+ days in some areas with no rain, then a good soaking rain like what we had over the weekend here is needed. But I tell you what is definitely needed, we need some rain in this area. The drought and the wildfire situation and extending over into Alabama is becoming very concerning, and that too a sign of the La Nina, a drier, cooler pattern overall, but the dry part is the key here, and I'll talk about that more as well. And some of the things that I have observed in my relatively short career, 21 years, short compared to geologic time, right? But there's a few things that I've picked up on where you see a La Nina, you see drought in the southeast, and what tends to break that drought. We'll talk about that later on. So just something to keep an eye on, a little teaser there. Looking at the tropical cyclone heat potential, this is a great site here from the NOAA AOML site, tropical cyclone heat potential, the upper ocean heat content. This is important because it shows us that this region in the Caribbean is still very warm. Water temperatures can support development, and it's not just that they are warm at the surface, but that warm water extends fairly deep. So that is one ingredient that is definitely in place. So we have all these different indicators. Now we look at the GFS as an example here. The very latest run, the 12Z run from today. Let's put this into motion and see what happens. The area we're going to be watching right down in here over the next 10 days. I've animated this out to the next 10 days just to show you how long this takes to get going. You notice the general counterclockwise shape to the 5,000 foot winds down here, sort of a gyre of low pressure, if you want to call it that. And you notice the energy slowly starts to build down here just north of Panama and Costa Rica, and it gradually gets better organized over time. We're sitting out here now at about day 5, still really not much going on, but then finally by day 6 it looks like it starts to take off a little bit more, bundles that energy a lot better, and then it develops into a fairly healthy tropical cyclone here as we approach day 10. And I'll just go to the last frame. And there it is, sitting down there in the Western Caribbean on day 10. That's a long way out, but again, showing you how long this takes is really the point, like I was saying. So we got to watch and see what happens. Our friends in Central America, certainly in Jamaica and Haiti. Haiti could most ill afford to have this come their way. So we'll see what happens. It all will depend. Here's a ridge you see here at day 10, fairly thick in the atmosphere. So that would tend to keep this buried, maybe more towards Central America, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. This is 10 days out. It takes a while for this to even develop. So let's see what happens once we do get closer to that genesis period when something does get started. I mean, heck, we're not even up to an invest area yet. I don't even know what the next one is. I'll have to look it up. It's been kind of quiet since Matthew and Nicole. And by the way, if this does get named, it'll be called Otto, O-T-T-O. And if it becomes a hurricane, well, it'll just add to the fairly busy season that we've had. And I will emphasize once more that it is not uncommon overall in the scheme of things to see development even in mid-November. That's why November's part of the hurricane season. So interesting times ahead. We'll see what happens. This could be a problem for somebody. Hopefully it won't. But we'll start to watch it. All right. It's been a little while, over a month, that we've had some relative quiet, and we'll turn our attention to the weather again. All right. So that's it from me for today. Have a great rest of your Monday. Good to be back in talking about this kind of stuff. Hopefully it doesn't end up being a major problem or whatever for somebody. Maybe bring some beneficial rains to some areas without it being too much. But we'll have to wait and see how all of that pans out. Have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.